sense. Meaning is now streaming live on YouTube. All right. It's unlisted right now, so you don't gotta worry about it right now. I'm just waiting for the link to pop up. Oh, I just hurt myself twice. Alright. Hold on. I'm going to tweet out the link. And then I'll give y'all the okay.
So we're starting off with Peterson and then MVP talk, right? Before we go to Ryan.
That sounds good with me.
All right. If you want to throw in the tackling stuff, I'm fine with that too. Whenever in the show, I don't care.
Also, the All-Pro teams got announced today. I don't know if that's something you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, we can do that.
All I know is there's limited Cowboys, and I was okay with that. I was very happy with that.
No Dak.
No Dak. No.
You hate to see it.
Copy link.
Even though he should have been.
Let me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WSOU Sports' NFL Playoffs Preview Show. My name is Michael Daly. I will be your host for this evening, and I am joined right now by my two co-hosts, Jory Mickens and Christian Gardner. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
It's fantastic to be here with you, Michael, and of course, Jory Mickens. What a guy. But great to talk some NFL football. It's unfortunate that my teams couldn't be there, but hey, I can't be ecstatic enough for this super wild card weekend, never before seen in the likes of the NFL.
Yeah, I'm doing exceptional as well. Thank you so much for asking, Michael. Again, I'm just so happy to be joined with you two handsome men.
This is going to be a great show because not only am I joined by you guys, but we get to talk about the playoffs. And we are also, throughout the 2 hours, we will be joined by sports staff reporters from WSU Sports who will break down each and every wild card matchup. This is Super Wild Card Weekend, so we will have plenty of time to talk about that. But guys, let's start off by talking about some headlines that led up to the playoffs, because obviously this was arguably the most unique NFL season in the league's history. And it just went to show that even through 17 weeks, it was not going to be easy. So I think a great place to start off, which was very indicative of how this season was the debacle that went down Sunday night between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington football team, when realistically the Philadelphia Eagles had a great opportunity to not only tie the game, but eventually take a lead, which all in all would have helped the New York Giants. But Doug Peterson, he decided to make some coaching changes on the field and had Nate Sudfeld. So I want to hear from you guys. We'll start off with Jory, and then we'll go to Christian. What did you think about this decision and the aftermath from it?
Yeah, this was a really strange situation. I don't think that there's really any salvaging the relationship between the Eagles and specifically their quarterback Carson Wentz. And it's kind of sad because we all know that he performed pretty poorly this season. But I get the sense that when he joins a different team, because I do expect him to be a starter in the league moving forward, that he's going to find himself once again and revert to the quarterback of old. And Doug Peterson's decision to bench Jalen Hurts, who seems to be their new starting quarterback in the season finale against the Washington football team, was a head scratcher from the moment it happened. During the broadcast, Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth, they mentioned, this season is not evaluation of their backup Nate Sudfeld. It's an evaluation of the guy who's supposed to help them get back to the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts. And it was extremely strange to watch him. I know probably they might have wanted to get a more of a veteran presence in such an important game, but at the same time, I thought Jalen Hurts gave them the best opportunity to win that game. So it was really weird to see that happen. I don't think the Eagles necessarily need a head coaching change, but I think this offseason is going to be incumbent on Doug Peterson repairing that relationship with his team, because the decision to bench Hurts ruffled a lot of feathers in the locker room. So, moving forward, again, it's going to be repairing that relationship with everyone on the team. But that said, I think the Eagles are in a good spot. They have a very talented roster, especially on the offensive end. They have their first-round selection from last year, Jalen Reagor, who played just 11 games, but I would imagine he's going to have a stellar sophomore year. Their tight end, Dallas Goedert, is more than capable at that position. I really like Miles Sanders as well, who's a great young running back for the Eagles. And they also have the number 6 pick in this year's draft. So they can add to that either on the offensive side or the defensive side. And there's a lot of really good prospects in this year's draft. So I think the Eagles are going to be okay. But again, this situation was just a head scratcher all around, just to say the least.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jory. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles were kind of listening to you as well for this draft coverage by the way that move went down. I mean, it was absolutely baffling when you see Jalen Hurts not in that game. And Doug Peterson, to make that decision, as you said, Joy, just completely ruffled some feathers. And it's weird to think about, but in week 17, you completely lose your entire team by sitting Jalen Hurts, who had been a star for this team in the last few weeks, and a player that Eagles fans wanted to see and wanted to be hopeful going into this offseason, and ended on a dark note. And I think it just kind of highlights the season that the Philadelphia Eagles had in 2020. And people had thought it had just been the Carson Wentz train wreck, to say the least, but it just shows what kind of system they were seeing behind closed doors with Doug Peterson at the helm. And I'm not going to call for Doug Peterson's job because he's the whole reason that they have a Super Bowl ring in the first place. But it's just very a questionable call. And we've seen reports of players needed to be held back from Doug Peterson as they're so upset about making this decision. You've seen the clips of Jalen Hurts, of him saying on the sideline, it doesn't make any sense. And that's a lot how NFL fans feel completely about this, and just absolutely baffling on Sunday night. And I don't know, it puts the Eagles in a weird situation. But as you said, Jory, it's such a solid team that they have a lot of pieces built off of, and what they do with that number 6 overall pick to either get Jalen Hurts or Nate Sudfeld, I guess, more weapons as they move forward into their careers.
From Doug Peterson's perspective, obviously losing this game was incentivized, because if they were to have won this game, they would have been slated to draft number 9, but instead number 6 overall. So obviously there is a difference in the caliber of player that you would potentially be drafting. But at the end of the day, there needs to be integrity when you're playing the game of football. And unfortunately for Doug Peterson, who a guy I thought before that game and even before this season when Philadelphia struggled, I thought he had a lot of integrity, especially with the fact that he was able to take on Tom Brady and the New England Patriots just 3 years ago, which isn't really that long of a time. And then now this. So in the span of 3 years, he pretty much just lost the franchise. Where'd you go? That's the question. But the part that really stands out to me, guys, is the fact that, and Christian, you brought this up, players had to be held back. That just goes to show how much respect was lost in that moment. And I don't think that was necessarily, the only thing that led to that. I honestly think it was a volcano that was just building up, and it just exploded on the sidelines. And that's all it took. But for me, what was really lost in translation was Carson Wentz, because in the moment, obviously Carson Wentz, he wasn't even suited up in the game. It was Jalen Hurts who was nabbed and taken to the sideline for Nate Sudfeld. Let's be honest. No disrespect to Nate Sudfeld, but he had no business being out there in a game that was as close as it was. Jalen Hurts accounted for all 14 points that they had. So to take him out the way they did, to me, it wasn't right. And if you're a New York Giants fan, you have legitimate reasons to hold a gripe and to be upset.
I think you bring up another good point of how severed things are with Carson Wentz, that on Sunday Night Football, he's not even dressed. That doesn't make any sense when he was an MVP candidate not too long ago, and he's not even going to suit up for the final game of the season, even though, of course, Jalen Hurts is your quarterback, I guess, until the fourth quarter. But Jalen Hurts is your quarterback. Why isn't Carson Wentz dressing up? And it just shows what's next for the Eagles franchise.
Yeah, and I also mentioned, Carson Wentz being on his way out. I would imagine. I'm pretty sure he said that he would like to try and repair that relationship with the Eagles and try and stick with the team. But if that doesn't happen, I mean, where do you guys think he could end up? Because there's a lot of openings, I would imagine. Even some playoff teams in this year's playoffs could have some openings. So do you think that he could be on his way out? And if so, where do you guys think he would end up?
For me, there's really only one place that is being circulated right now, and it's Indianapolis, and it's because of one name, Frank Reich. That was his quarterback coach. Now he's the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and it's for good reason, especially with Phillip Rivers. Tomorrow potentially could be his last game, and we'll talk about that and more. But personally, guys, and Christian, I want to know what you think about this. I don't see Carson Wentz playing another game as a Philadelphia Eagle.
I see it the same way, Mike. I mean, how could it be that he could be back in Philadelphia? And I think the pairing in Indianapolis just works so well. And that team is almost kind of ready set that if Carson Wentz can get back to the player that hopefully he could be, and of course, in that it goes back to their head coach, Frank Reich. And that would be a match made in heaven for him. But I mean, there's so many places that you could go in this QB carousel. And I mean, even rumors with Deshaun Watson, that could change absolutely everything.
It really could. Let's talk about now switching gears to more stable environments other than Philadelphia. And we're going to now talk about the NFL MVP race. And later on in the show, right around 9:30 to 10 o'clock, we'll talk about All Pro because those selections came out. But talking about the MVP race, there was a few names to be desired and selected. Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen, even Buffalo Bills wide receiver Stephon Diggs, his name was thrown in there. Guys, I'm going to start off and then we'll go to Christian and then Jory after that. For me, there's one name and one name only, and it's Aaron Rodgers. Okay, 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His 48 touchdowns rank 5 all time for a single season touchdown record. He was absolutely impressive. And just talking about the weapons that he have, and especially if you compare that with Kansas City, it's not even close. Yes, he has Davante Adams, but personally, I feel like Aaron Rodgers really developed Davante Adams into the wide receiver that he is currently. So, Christian, what do you think about the MVP race?
I strongly was a Russell Wilson guy early on in the season, but as it went on, it couldn't be anyone else than Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. I mean, absolutely destroying the league right now and having career numbers as even though we already know he's a Hall of Famer. And that's insane to think about, that a guy like that can be even better this late in his career. It has to go to him. And if it does, he would become the sixth person to become a 3-time MVP. And that's elite company of Peyton Manning, Jim Brown, John Unitas, Brett Favre, and Tom Brady. And thinking about those other seasons, Aaron Rodgers is better than his other MVP seasons, where he's having career years in touchdowns with 48 and career numbers with 71% completing percentage. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been absolutely phenomenal for Green Bay. But, I mean, George, do you see it any differently?
No, I think I have to agree with both of you. I really do think it was Rodgers. And I think I'm in the same boat as Christian, where I wanted it. I wanted Russell Wilson to get the MVP, especially the way he performed in the first half of the season. But again, like you said, Christian, as the season went on, it just became Rodgers' award to lose, really. And like you guys both mentioned, he led the NFL in passing touchdowns, led the NFL in completion percentage. He had the fewest interceptions of any quarterback who started all 16 games. He led the league in QBR, and he helped the Packers secure the number 1 seed in the NFC. So there's really not much to be said about the way he performed. Other candidates that could be Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and even Derrick Henry for his insane season as a running back for the Tennessee Titans. But I think it's really at this point Aaron Rodgers' award. I think it would be foolish to give it to anyone else.
At the end of the day, a lot of people have forgotten that Patrick Mahomes, coming into Week 16, he was actually the betting favorite to win it. But he struggled in that game, and then all it took was for Aaron Rodgers to have a steady game, which he is so known to have. And there you go. Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. But now we can shift gears and move on from, I guess, pre-playoff talk to now get into the nitty-gritty of playoffs, where our reporter Ryan Johnson is going to come on right now and talk about the 1 seeds from both conferences, the AFC and the NFC. I think we have Ryan getting ready, but Ryan will, in just a few moments, talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. So we're just waiting for Ryan to get ready. Ryan,
Hey
you
guys.
there?
Yeah, I'm here.
How's it going, Ryan?
I'm pretty good. Hope you guys are doing well.
That's great. So we're going to start off, at least my question to you, it's going to be about the Green Bay Packers and a guy we just talked about, Aaron Rodgers. What do you have to say about their journey this season and how well of a season they had? And where do they stand with this bye in the first round?
I mean, obviously they had a great season. They went 13-3, and Aaron Rodgers just dominated. You're talking about the 48 touchdowns, which is just ridiculous. But I think even more impressive than that is that just the 5 interceptions he had. I mean, that touchdown to interception ratio that's historic. That's historic numbers right there. And I mean, to pair that with 4,300 yards in total, I mean, it's ridiculous. And starting out the season, they dropped a couple of games early. They had a really bad loss against the Buccaneers. I think they lost like 38-10 or something like that. So they started off pretty bad early, or not pretty bad, but not what they could be early. And then they really picked it up. I mean, they've won 6 weeks in a row. They're looking stronger than ever heading into the playoffs. And honestly, I mean, this may be a bit controversial, but they're my pick for Super Bowl champions right now.
Honestly, I don't think that's not fair, Ryan. They've just been hot right at the right time and completely this entire season. But what have you seen on their offense? They have the number 1 scoring offense in the league. And of course, Aaron Rodgers has been at the helm of that. But what are some of these weapons that they've been so successful this entire year to be putting up numbers like they are?
I mean, you got obviously Devontae Adams, probably one of, if not the best wide receivers in the league right now. 1,400 yards, 18 touchdowns on the season. I mean, and they're balancing that really well with Aaron Jones, who's a great running back. I think he's really underrated. I mean, he's had 1,100 yards for the year, 9 touchdowns, and 5.7 yards a carry, which is pretty decent. That's a pretty decent average right there. But as a whole, I think their whole wide receiver core is pretty underrated. I mean, you got guys like Allen Lazard, Equanimeous St. Brown, who hasn't played a whole lot this season due to injury, but he's healthy for the playoffs, and I think he can be a real weapon for him. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They have a lot of weird names, but they're good. They're all good. So yeah, they have a really balanced offense as a whole. So they're looking really nice.
Ryan, I have another interesting question. Just about the fact that they are the 1 seed, they have the bye, and they'll have home field advantage throughout the playoffs as long as they stay alive. But it's been such a strange year, obviously, with COVID restrictions and not allowing fans at the field. How much of an impact do you think that being at Lambeau Field will have for the Packers? They're so dominant there in Green Bay, but how much of an impact do you think that will have on the playoffs?
I mean, definitely a big one. I'm sure they wish that the fans were there because Packers fans are just rabid at Lambeau, and they always provide a great atmosphere for games. But Lambeau is one of the hardest places to play in the NFL in the playoffs. I would have said Gillette Stadium, but the Patriots obviously are not the team that they were a few years ago, and they're not in the playoffs anymore. And they lost in Gillette last year against the Titans. So, I think this is one of the hardest places to play in the NFL, and it gives them a real advantage over teams like the Saints, who are warm weather teams. And I think that's people really discount the impact that the weather can have because there was a stat that something like 15 or out of the last 15 Super Bowl winners, only one was a warm weather team, and that was the Saints in 2010. So the weather can be a huge impact on teams, and the Packers having home field advantage is huge for them throughout the playoffs.
Ryan, if you're Matt LaFleur and you're getting ready this entire week, because obviously, although you have a bye, you're not taking the week off. You're studying film, you're working on everything that happened throughout the entire season, and obviously you're watching all of the playoff games go down, unfold. Again, if you are Matt LaFleur, who are you rooting to play if you are the Green Bay Packers? Because obviously the 1 seed, you are going to play the lowest remaining seed. And just looking at it now, for me, they might be rooting to play the Chicago Bears because they just played them and they just defeated the Bears. But other teams that they could potentially play, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if they get past the Washington football team, the Los Angeles Rams. So who do you think they would be rooting to play?
Well, I mean, the Buccaneers, I'd rather play the football team than the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers were pretty decent all season. Tom Brady really did a good job of leading that offense, and Washington, they picked it up a lot towards the end, so they do have some momentum coming into the playoffs. But I definitely think the Buccaneers are a more well-rounded team. So if I'm Matt LaFleur, I'd definitely be rooting for um, the Buccaneers to lose that game. I'd be rooting for the football team in that game. But the Bears, they're going to have a tough one against the Saints going down to the Superdome. That's where the Saints thrive. It's going to be a hard one, but if they can, I mean, I'm sure he would much rather play a struggling or more mediocre Chicago Bears team than a really solid New Orleans Saints team in the playoffs.
That's got to be an odd feeling for Green Bay Packers fans, having to root for the Chicago Bears. I don't think anyone would ever agree to do that as a diehard Packers fan. But, man, it might be a better matchup. But I think that Buccaneers team is pretty solid, and we'll get more into it later.
Jory, what say you? What question do you have for Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of avenues we could go down, but I mean, you mentioned that I believe you said that this is your pick to win the whole thing. This is your pick to host the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the season. So, how important or who needs to step up the most for the Packers in order to bring home the trophy? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Does he need to just continue playing like he has all season? The presumptive MVP. Or is it someone on the defensive side of the ball, maybe Jair Alexander or the Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith brothers?
Yeah, I'm going to go. I think the defense as a whole just needs to step up. If they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, I'm presuming that they're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs, who are just a ridiculously high-powered offense. I mean, their offense is just insane. So getting stops in that game is almost more important for them than getting scores because you can't score. You can't win if the other team scores more than you, obviously. So it doesn't matter how much you score if the Chiefs score more. So I definitely think the defense as a whole would need to really step up in that game. And they've been pretty good all season. It's one of the first times in a long time that the Packers have really had a good defense. But they're going to need to take it to the next echelon to really solidify themselves as that Super Bowl favorite in my eyes.
Ryan, that's why I like you, because you just opened up a segue for us now to talk about the other number 1 seed in the AFC. So looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously a similar path that the Packers were on, but I would say that they were more dominant. So what can you say just about their season and how well Patrick Mahomes did? Because obviously, although he may not win the MVP, he's right up there as a potential candidate.
Oh my God. I mean, he's just insane. He had 4,700 passing yards, and he didn't even play in week 17. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, their offense as a whole is just so insane. I mean, you got Tyreek Hill catching, and Travis Kelce is probably the best tight end in the league right now. He had 1,400 yards as a tight end, which is just like, that's just insane to me. And, they've got decent running backs too. They've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell, who was obviously huge news when they picked him up earlier in the season. He hasn't done, I'm not sure, quite as well as they'd hoped. Only 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, but always a viable weapon for them. I think a big question coming in could be their offensive line, because Mitchell Schwartz, he's been on an all-pro team for numerous years now. He's sidelined for the playoffs with a back injury. So he has been out since week 7, but it could be interesting moving forward, seeing if some gaps start to open up in that offensive line, making it harder for Pat Mahomes to make some throws. Obviously, he doesn't need a whole lot of time to get the ball out of the pocket, but it could be an interesting storyline moving forward.
As you said, Ryan, that Chiefs offense is just stupid to watch sometimes. The amount of numbers and how they can move down the field so methodically. And we've seen this for the last couple of years now. And I mean, we can't say it enough. They were able to come away with a Super Bowl a year ago. And how do you feel about this team compared to last year's team? And how do you think they could make it back to the Super Bowl yet again and maybe hoist it for back-to-back years?
Definitely championship experience is huge. Getting that first one under your belt, they're going to have a lot of confidence in themselves moving forward in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. If you can get one, you're going to be the team to beat, and you're going to know that you're the team to beat. So you got to go out there and perform, and the Chiefs always do. So definitely a huge stripe on their belt moving forward, really. I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of your question, Christian.
Just how are they able to just possibly hoist it again, as you say? I mean, the number one team in the NFL right now, and might do it again back-to-back years. How did they do it?
I mean, really, they just keep doing what they do. I mean, they've just been so good all season. Just keep giving the ball to Pat Mahomes and let him go to work. Really, I don't really see. He's probably the best player in football right now by a margin, I'd say. And he's been doing great for them all season. I don't see any reason why they should change anything up. Yeah, they're great. The one thing that I'm not too happy about with the Chiefs is their rushing defense. They're a little suspect on that. And I really think that a team like the Titans, if Derrick Henry gets back into that form that we saw him last postseason, they could prove some problems for the Chiefs in the second round. I would say the Ravens, because they're playing the Titans. They also have a great running back in Lamar Jackson. But
what is so funny?
Don't fire me, Wilner. But no, I think the Ravens are a little too one-dimensional on offense, and the Titans will squeak by them. But in the Super Bowl, I think the Packers will edge it out on them, just because I think the Packers really need this one. Aaron Rodgers, has been a while since he's won a Super Bowl. It's 2011, I think, and he's kind of choked. He's kind of been known for choking in the past few years in the playoffs. I mean, they had a big lead in 2017. They were ready to go to the Super Bowl. They had a 2-touchdown lead on the Seahawks. Seahawks came back, forced overtime. They lost the game. So I definitely think that the Packers are going to be hungry for this one, and I think they're going to just take them down in the Super Bowl.
Just overdue.
Yeah, and we haven't seen back-to-back champions since the early 2000s, when the New England Patriots did it in 2004 and 2005, I believe. But I guess like what Christian said, I mean, who in the AFC do you think can dethrone the reigning Super Bowl champions? You mentioned the Tennessee Titans because of their running game with Derrick Henry. The Baltimore Ravens, and hopefully, Lamar Jackson can win a playoff game finally for what seems like forever. But who do you think in the AFC can dethrone the Kansas City Chiefs?
I think the Buffalo Bills have the best shot. They've got a great quarterback and wide receiver tandem in Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. They've had a great offense all season, and they've really been doing it on the defensive side of the ball as well, pretty much throughout the whole season. I know the Chiefs beat them earlier in the season, but it was a close game, and I don't think that any Chiefs fan should be counting out the Bills right now. I think the Bills are really looking solid going into the playoffs and definitely have the best shot at beating them.
There is a lot to go down in the AFC as an entire conference and even the NFC. But Ryan, we thank you so much for your time. That's all we have talking about the 1 seeds from both AFC and NFC. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. That was Ryan Johnston, our reporter on both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers as they have this weekend off. And guys, quickly, before we go to our next reporter, Jonathan Haidt, who will talk about the Bills and the Colts matchup. What were your impressions from what Ryan said about both squads? Jory, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just hit the nail on the coffin for both teams. They have to be somewhat of the favorites, given that they're both the 1 seeds in their conferences. The Packers, I like that pick to win the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's necessarily my pick, but I think it's a good one for sure. The way that they performed all season long, I think they're one of the most balanced teams, both offensively and defensively. Aaron Rodgers, again, playing like an MVP, like we mentioned, but don't sleep on that defense because they have players that could potentially, if they gave the MVP ever to defensive players, there's a lot of players on that defense that could be in the running for an MVP award. So I think he hit it right on the nose with the Packers. And then the Chiefs, again, their offense with Patrick Mahomes is so potent. It's going to be hard to stop for anyone, not just in the AFC, but in the entire playoff bracket, really. So I think Ryan did a swell job breaking down both of those teams.
Yeah, Ryan just showed us how dominant both these teams are. And guys, it's not very often that both number 1 seeds make it to the Super Bowl. So if you had to bet against one of them, who would you not say will make the Super Bowl?
Honestly, I'm going to say the Kansas City Chiefs because down the stretch, Patrick Mahomes, he struggled a bit. And I personally think this is the year that other teams can catch up and make ground.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Michael on that one. I think it's just and I would imagine it's a little bit of Super Bowl hangover almost. I wouldn't imagine it's tough. It's tough to go back to back. It really is. It happens very rarely in the NFL, really in sports at all. But I think I would have to pick the Chiefs if one of these teams were to lose. I think it would probably more likely be Kansas City.
I think I'm with you on that. The AFC side is a little bit too tough for them.
Now let's stick with the AFC, but we're now going to be joined by our reporter, Jonathan Haidt, who's here to talk about the game tomorrow, just about 16 hours from now, if my math is correct, the Indianapolis Colts and the Buffalo Bills. But Jonathan, first and foremost, how are you doing, pal?
I'm good. How are you guys? Thank you for having me tonight.
We're doing well. So I think a great place to start off is that Buffalo, I don't necessarily think people expected them to have this dominant of a season. Granted, they were the favorites to win the AFC East, but they really shocked a lot of people with how well Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen were able to work together. So my question to you, Jonathan, what did you take away from this season for the Buffalo Bills?
So, Michael, I think this all goes back to last year's playoffs where the Bills lost to the Texans. They blew that 16-0 lead at half in the second half, and then to go on and lose the game. And I feel like Josh Allen got a chip on his shoulder because of that. And going out and getting Stephon Diggs is going to be a great move regardless of any team. But pairing up with a young quarterback who's got a chip on his shoulder, the critics have been against him ever since that playoff game. And coming out this season and putting up MVP-like numbers, putting up numbers like 37 touchdowns, just only 10 interceptions. Again, an MVP-like season. It looks really good for him and Diggs to establish the rapport that they have. And now going to the playoffs, and like Ryan said, even picking them as a team to beat the Chiefs potentially, matching up against Mahomes, like having just a hot offense to take into the playoffs, especially this year in the AFC.
Yeah, the Bills have such a high octane offense, number 2 scoring offense in the league right now. So for a Colts team, if things get into a barn and burner situation, do you think they could keep up with that red hot Bills offense?
I think the key for the Colts is going to be their linebackers as well as their cornerbacks. One matchup that I circled actually was the former Vikings, Stephon Diggs versus Xavier Rhodes, both in their new teams after playing for the Vikings 2 seasons ago and both playing exceptionally well. Obviously, Stephon Diggs was out of this world, but it's going to be the Darius Leonards, the DeForest Buckner, who they got from San Francisco over the offseason. Those types of guys are going to have to be game changers in this game in order to have a chance to keep up with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and we talk so much about Buffalo's offense because it's so potent with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, arguably one of the best receivers in the league this year. But what can you say about the Colts offense? I mean, in Week 17, their running back Jonathan Taylor, shout out New Jersey, he totaled 253 yards and 2 touchdowns in their game against the Jaguars. So, I mean, what can the Colts do on offense to keep up with Buffalo? Because that's going to be a big component in this one as well.
Like you said, Jory, Jonathan Taylor ended with 1,169 yards on the ground this season and 11 touchdowns. And a key for the Colts, if they're going to have a chance to hold the run with the Bills, is to establish the run game. And it's just a chance so they could take the pressure off Phillip Rivers, who I know you guys were talking about before. This could be his potential last game in the NFL. And I think just establishing Taylor, and if you're able to run on the Bills, which is there's a good chance they could, and capitalizing in the red zone, because the Bills aren't the greatest defensive team when it comes to terms with the red zone, I think the Colts are going to have a good chance to possibly even upset the Bills.
Jonathan, one thing that I think is a pertinent part to this entire storyline is the fact that there will be fans in attendance tomorrow. Just over 6,000 fans will be there in Orchard Park. What impact do you think that will have on this game? Because Bills Mafia, they are as credible of any fan base. They show up with a lot of pride. They even undergo several tests for COVID to make sure that everything checked out. And obviously there was no spread of the virus in Western New York. But what impact do you think that will have on this game tomorrow?
I think this is going to have a huge impact. For the Bills, this is looking for their first playoff win since 1995. They're only trailing the Bengals and the Lions as the only teams in the NFL who haven't won a playoff game since then. We know so much about the Bills Mafia, how they always come out. They always have a good time whenever they go to Bills games. And they really provide a presence, like how the Seattle fans used to be like the 12th man. This is really going to be a factor tomorrow, especially Phillip Rivers, who, he played in sunny San Diego back when the Chargers were in San Diego. Only 1 year in Indianapolis. I found a stat today. Rivers hasn't won a game with a kickoff temperature below 35 degrees since the 2013 season. Just combine that with the weather aspect, with the fans actually being in attendance, even though it's not a full capacity. There's definitely going to be some other factors just beyond the players in tomorrow's game.
Well, that's a great fact to bring up, Jonathan. And I mean, this is going to be such an interesting matchup for you. Who are you most tapped into? Who do you think is going to have the biggest game in this Buffalo Bills and Colts matchup?
Christian, I have actually 2 players. I picked one from each team. The first and most obvious for the Bills is going to be Josh Allen, just seeing if he can continue the momentum he had during the regular season and just being able to actually step up in the playoffs, because we've seen so many good playoff quarterbacks play well during the regular season. When it comes down to the playoffs, they almost like choke. And again, last playoff round against the Texans, we saw that not being able to bring home a victory, and just showing that he can be a playoff quarterback. He can make noise with the Bills this postseason. And on the Colts side, again, I think it's going to be Jonathan Taylor, because without his offensive presence, I feel like Phillip Rivers is not going to have a great game. And all Phillip Rivers has to do is just convert on these opportunities, especially in the red zone. And Jonathan Taylor, he's so quick. He can hit the holes that the offensive line, led by Quentin Nelson, another New Jersey RBC native, opens for him. And he's going to be able to outrun the linebackers of Buffalo, such as Matt Milano. Those guys are going to have to step up and try to catch him. So, again, I think it's going to be Allen and Taylor, but there's so many other not necessarily minor players, but supporting players like a Cole Beasley to take the pressure off of Stephon Diggs, because I'm sure he's going to be double teamed throughout most of the game. On the Bills side, on the Colts side, like a T.Y. Hilton, who had a good, strong second half showing to the season. Just, again, some offensive weapons to look out for as well.
Yeah, and, despite the Colts offense really finding themselves in the second half of the season and their defense being a strength all season long, I still expect the Bills to win. But you mentioned that Phillip Rivers has somewhat underperformed in cold weather temperatures throughout his career. Really, do you think that the Colts can pull off the upset?
I think it's very possible, but I still think that Josh Allen has just been playing out of his mind this season. And again, just dating back to last season, they're at home, the fans are there, and the Colts, I'm not going to say that they've been cold to end the season, or Phillip Rivers specifically has been cold to end the season, but Josh Allen's been red hot. He's had 15 touchdowns over the past couple of weeks and like 3 interceptions. Again, Stephon Diggs, going to use him again on offense, and there's just so many things going in the Bills' favor. But I still think the Colts have a chance compared to like other wildcard games you guys will get into. But it's all going to come down to Jonathan Taylor. If Jonathan Taylor rushes for like 50 yards and even just like a touchdown, I don't think that's going to be enough, because you can't kick field goals against this Bills team. You're going to have to score those touchdowns and in bunches, because I think it's going to be a shootout.
Jonathan, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. That was Jonathan Haidt, our reporter for the Bills and Colts game. Take care, buddy. Thank you for your reporting.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good night, guys.
All right. Once again, that was Jonathan Haidt. Let's not waste any time, though, because that is what Jonathan just talked about. And when we all asked him questions, was the 1:00 game tomorrow. But now we're going to focus on the 4:40 game between the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. And joining us in just a few seconds is none other than our sports reporter, Ben Harris, who will be covering this game. We're going to ask him a bunch of questions about that. So we're just waiting till he gets set with us to talk about him. And I do want to say this, guys, before we get into Ben and start talking about the Rams. Phillip Rivers, his last playoff game in the cold was against New England Patriots. That didn't go too well, so we shall see how that ends up.
I mean, it's such a struggle for Phillip Rivers out there in the cold, being in San Diego all those years.
Let's see how that is. But now we are joined by Ben Harris, our reporter for the game tomorrow between the Rams and the Seahawks. Ben, obviously these two teams played each other week 16, and it's a different dynamic because Jared Goff entered the game relatively healthy, but obviously he sustained the thumb injury. What impact do you think that will have on this game tomorrow, and who will the Rams go with potentially?
I think it's going to have a big impact, Michael. I mean, first of all, I hope you guys are doing very well. But this Jared Goff injury throws a whole new wrench into this playoff matchup. I mean, it's an intense matchup between two NFC West teams that have been competing back and forth all year. Obviously, the Seahawks came out on top divisionally and are now the 3rd seed in the playoffs, but don't sleep on this Rams team. Yes, Jared Goff is banged up, but he was able to finish that Week 16 game after popping his thumb back into place after a 3rd quarter injury. I honestly don't think Jared Goff's injury is going to be the biggest factor on that offense. I think it's going to be the banged up backfield. I think Goff is going to be able to play this playoff game. And, I mean, there's a difference between sitting out Week 17 because you hurt yourself in Week 16. And, I mean, keep in mind, he finished that game. It was a tough injury, but he finished the game. I just think playoff football brings a whole new element to things, and Sean McVay is not going to trot out there without his starting franchise quarterback.
Ben, hope you're doing well. In this one, the entire season we've heard so much about the Seahawks defense, and now we have these questions about the Rams offense. Who would you more put your faith in, either in Jared Goff and the Rams offense or the Seahawks defense?
Honestly, I think I'd have to go with Seattle's defense. While in the beginning of the season, they had a very tough time containing the Rams or really anybody, the defense has very much stepped up. I mean, look at that second game against the Rams. They were able to, yes, rely on a banged up Rams backfield, and Jared Goff was kind of shaky, but that pass defense was getting after Jared Goff in the first half, and it was a lot of secondary pressure being caused because of good coverage. So I think I would rely on Seattle's defense more, but I honestly think that this game's going to be decided based on the other side of the ball, where will this Seattle Russell Wilson led offense be able to beat the number 1 ranked pass defense in football?
Yeah, and Ben, that's exactly kind of the question that I was going to ask. The Rams, they arguably have one of the best defenses just overall in the NFL. You mentioned their pass defense. Russell Wilson had arguably his worst game against the Rams in Week 10, and their star receiver DK Metcalf in 2 games against the Rams, he just totaled 8 receptions for 87 yards. So what can the Seahawks do really on offense to really find themselves and try and take down this stout Rams defense?
Look, Jory, this is a tough matchup. This Rams secondary is one of the best we might have ever seen. They're number 1 in every single category. The Steelers secondary is the only one even close statistically to compare. But I think a lot of this game is going to depend on the Seattle's offense's run game, because, look, Jalen Ramsey is going to eliminate Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf on whatever play it is. I mean, that's just the facts. He is a shutdown corner, and he needs to have a great performance in this playoff matchup to keep that franchise quarterback lockdown reputation around him. And I mean, we know Aaron Donald's going to go out and do his thing. So for Seattle to win this game, Russell Wilson needs to do Russell Wilson things, throw for, I don't know, 25 from 30, 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, very Russell Wilson numbers, and then add another 50 on the ground, and that's where it's going to be decided. Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde need to have big games. When they have big games, especially Chris Carson, because Chris Carson can do it as both a runner and a receiver. If he can become a dual threat back in this game, he will play a huge factor in Seattle's victory, because that secondary is going to be tough to beat. Russ has to do what he can against that secondary, but the run game is going to be where they score their points.
Ben, my question to you, and I don't think this is talked about enough, is the experience of Pete Carroll. Mm-hmm. Because he actually has a lot of experience playing against the Rams. And actually, in his first season, they were kind of in a play-in game. In 2010, it was actually January 2nd, 2011. They were both 7-8 teams. The winner of that would go to the playoffs. It turned out that Seattle won that game 16-6. This is a guy, he has Super Bowls. He has Super Bowl appearances. What do you have to say about his experience, and how vital is that to Seattle winning tomorrow?
Listen, man, Pete Carroll is a fantastic coach. No one will ever debate that. I mean, the man's won a Super Bowl. The man has had success at the collegiate level. Pete Carroll is a legendary coach, future Hall of Famer. That is no question. But Sean McVay, while he's young, has plenty of winning experience. I mean, the man went to a Super Bowl 2 years ago. It didn't turn out the way they wanted it to, but we can't not give Sean McVay the credit he deserves as a young coach finding success in this league. So I think Pete Carroll having experience against this Rams team is a great thing, and I think that it goes both ways when you're divisional rivals. You see each other a lot. You're paying a lot of attention to one another. So I don't think one coach has an edge over the other, just because I think Sean McVay is the hot young coach on the scene, has been able to curate a winning culture there in Los Angeles. And I think Pete Carroll's experience brings a lot to the table as well. But I really do, at this point in time, see them as fairly even game planners, and in terms of their day-to-day ability as coaches. I think that the matchup there is very even. I think this one is going to be really cool to watch from a coaching perspective.
Now, Ben, these are 2 teams with a lot of playoff experience and Super Bowl experience at that. Do you think in this matchup between these 2 teams, could you see any of them making a deep run in these playoffs?
That's tough to say, just because both have such flaws. I think they're both solid teams, but they're both incredibly shaky at various points throughout the season. I mean, Seattle's defense during the early part of the year was folding left and right. They've stepped up the past 6 to 7 games. I mean, they've gone on a little winning streak here toward the end of the season, but Seattle's defense still needs to prove it at a playoff level. It's a different level of intensity. Then the Rams offense, sometimes we've seen Jared Goff throw for like 5 touchdowns. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp each have 100. The running backs have almost 100. Like, their offense, when it's clicking, is one of the most unbeatable in the whole National Football League. But when it's not, it's just boring, very micromanaged, like Madden-esque, like playing on all Madden simulation mode football, where like you're just not getting good drives together. This Rams offense, when it's clicking, is so exciting to watch and high profile, but when it's not, it's just like overly tactical and not good football, just because Sean McVay can have that tendency to micromanage every little thing just because he's playing head quarterback with Jared Goff all the time. But I mean, both sides have their flaws, so I don't really see either making a huge push, just especially with Russ's second half derailment, just kind of putting up mediocre numbers and performances. I hope Russ can return to playoff form. I mean, in that later part of the second Rams matchup, when he led that game-winning classic 4-minute football, secure the win with a 5-play, 4 receivers targeted drive for 60 yards. I mean, that was a Russell Wilson being an elite quarterback moment against this same Rams team. So I really don't believe in either of these teams to get to the Super Bowl. I'd say my winner of this matchup is going to be Seattle. So I guess I could see them making the NFC Championship game at best.
So there you have it. Ben Harris says Seattle will win this and possibly even go to the NFC Championship game. But Ben, that's all the time we have. Thank you for your excellent reporting. All the best wishes to you, pal.
See ya.
All right. Once again, that was Ben Harris talking about tomorrow's game between the Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. And now it's time to bring in Joe Matthews, who will come on to talk about the nightcap of tomorrow's playoff games between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington football team. So it seems that we have Joe. Joe, how's it going, pal?
It's going good. How are you guys doing?
We are doing very well. So my question to you, and this was a big storyline this week, and I think it could have an impact on the game, and it's quarterback play for the Washington football team. Obviously, Alex Smith, his journey since 2018 is well documented. And now with the team not really having a third string quarterback since Dwayne Haskins is gone, there is a chance that the quarterbacks could rotate tomorrow between Alex Smith and Taylor Heineke. What do you think Ron Rivera and the Washington football team will do at the quarterback position tomorrow night?
I think we're going to see Alex Smith out there for the bulk of the snaps during the game. I think so long as Alex Smith can walk and get onto the field, he's going to be on the field and be starting for the team. I mean, his grit and determination is second to none, as obviously a lot of people know due to his story throughout the past couple of years. I think Taylor Heineke is going to be seen at some point, but I think really only if things get desperate for Washington. Because Alex Smith, don't get me wrong, he has been phenomenal so far this season. He's won games for the team, but there is a bit of risk in him playing, especially against a team like the Buccaneers that have a really strong defense. In Week 17 against the Eagles, Alex Smith, he was a little banged up, and you could sort of tell. I mean, as soon as the Eagles got even the slightest bit of pressure on him, the play was pretty much over because he really does not have that mobility that he used to have anymore to get out of the pocket, especially being banged up a little bit because he has a calf strain that he's been dealing with. But I think overall, he's going to be able to get out there, and as long as he's not turning the ball over and he's being that game manager that he normally is, I think he's going to be the quarterback that they're going to stick with to try to get them. to win the game. I think if Washington starts going down by 2-3 touchdowns and it's really looking desperate, they need a big play, I think that's when they're going to put in someone like Taylor Heineke. Maybe he can unleash a 70-yard bomb to Terry McLaurin as a sort of Hail Mary and get the team back into the game.
Hey, how's it going, Joe? In this matchup, there's two such strong defenses, and for the Washington football team, it's that defensive line that starts at the front. But how does the Washington football team slow down this red-hot Buccaneers offense, and of course, maybe the greatest of all time, Tom Brady?
I think the number one thing they're going to have to do is put pressure on Tom Brady. I mean, that's sort of been how teams for, the past over a decade now, that's how you beat Tom Brady stereotypically, is you got to put pressure on him. When he has guys coming at him up the middle from the D-line, that's when he sort of gets a little shaken, gets into trouble. And Washington's built to do that, I think. I mean, they have such a strong offensive line. They've got Chase Young, who's a phenomenal rookie. They've got Montez Sweat, who, while underrated, actually had a better season this year statistically than Chase Young. And then they've got two guys, Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, coming up the middle. So I think they're going to be able to get the pressure on Tom Brady, but it's going to be a big test because Washington really hasn't faced anybody on the caliber of Tom Brady, I don't think, this season. So if they're up to the test and if they can really get pressure on Brady and rattle him, that's going to be the key for them winning the game. But, you never know.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, the NFC East was made a mockery of all season long, the lack of competition or the lack of talent in the conference. But that said, Washington, they have, like Christian mentioned, an elite defense. They were the best defense against passes over 20 yards. They ranked second in passing yards per game allowed. And like you mentioned, their defensive line with Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, and standout rookie Chase Young is one of the most dynamic defensive lines in all of football. And on offense, Alex Smith, although he only started 6 games for Washington, he went 5-1 in those games, and he actually defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was their first loss of the season back in Week 13. So do you think that this matchup is going to be a little bit closer than people expect? I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are getting the benefit of the doubt because they have Tom Brady. They have such a potent offense. But do you think people are sleeping too much on Washington?
I think people are going to be surprised. I think there's obviously, like you said, a lot of people going into this thinking that it's just, that Washington is the king of the trash pile, that is the NFC East. But I think they're going to keep it a close game. I think that defense, they're built to play an offense like Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, what they have. I think they can really hold the Bucs to, 14, 20 points, somewhere in that range. The issue for Washington is going to be their offense. And also the Buccaneers have such a strong defense. The Buccaneers have the number 1 rush defense in the NFL. And the strength of Washington's offense is in the run game. So I think if Washington loses the game, it's going to be like 20-14 by Tampa. And if Washington wins the game, it's going to be about 20-14 by Washington. And if you want to stray away from more of the football and statistics sort of stuff, going down narrative street, there's a couple of things. Number one, Washington's the first team under 500 to make the playoffs since the 2014 Carolina Panthers, who were coached by Ron Rivera. They went 7-8-1, and in their wildcard game, they actually won. And second of all, the rumor on the street is that Washington's going to be going out and wearing their all-white uniforms on Saturday, and they're undefeated so far this season when they wear all white. So things are looking up for Washington in that regard.
Joe, I'll ask the last question here because we're running up against the segment clock. But one storyline, which I would argue was even bigger than what quarterback will be playing, was what Chase Young said at in essentially the post game of the Eagles game on Sunday night. Coming into the tunnel, he said, "I want Tom. I'm coming for Tom Brady. I'm coming." So to me, it raised a lot of alarm bells around the National Football League because a lot of people might have said, I don't know if you want to poke that bear. That's Tom Brady. What did you think about that? And what do you think that will do for tomorrow's game, especially with Chase Young and Tom Brady?
I think that really just shows that someone like Chase Young is really fired up and he's ready. Even though he's a rookie and, typically rookies aren't really that experienced obviously they're not experienced when it comes to the playoffs because they're rookies, but the guys who don't have a lot of time in the NFL, they can get sort of anxious going up against guys like Tom Brady, who's an NFL great, who Chase Young grew up watching Tom Brady. But for him to come out and say that, say, I want Tom Brady, I'm ready, I'm going to go get him, I think that just shows that he's going to be locked in and he's going to mean business. And that Tom Brady, he should watch out because Chase Young is going to be coming for him.
He definitely will. And I think if you're Ron Rivera, that's what you want to see from your star defensive end, because he's a guy that I think Ron Rivera has a lot of faith in. But Joe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all of your excellent reporting. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Matthews, take care, buddy.
Thank you guys for having me. Have a good night.
All right, that was Joe Matthews. And now we can kind of switch gears from, because obviously that was the last game that we talked about for Saturday's slate. Now we're going to move on to the first game of Sunday's slate, where our reporter, Jimmy Bliss, is set to join us in just a few moments to talk about the Ravens and the Titans. I think we have Jimmy coming up right now. Jimmy, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Michael. What's up?
Nothing much. I hope you're doing well, pal.
Doing well. I'm so excited to be on the show, and I'm excited to talk some Ravens Titans.
Now, see, this matchup, I think there's a lot to it, because it's not just two teams in the playoffs playing each other. There's a lot of animosity built here, especially with last year when the whole big trust thing was going on and Tennessee knocked the Ravens off. They really stuck it to the Ravens. And even this year, in that rain-soaked game on November 22nd, the Titans won in overtime in Baltimore. And before the game, these two teams nearly fought. In particular, Malcolm Butler and Coach John Harbaugh nearly fought. So when it comes to the storyline and when it comes to the animosity between these two teams, what are you looking for in that game on Sunday?
Yeah, so it's no secret that these two teams don't like each other. Like you alluded to earlier, they almost fought earlier this season. Last season, the Titans absolutely stuck it to the Ravens. They won 28-12, but the game was never even close. The Titans just had the foot on the neck of the Ravens throughout the entire game. So it was really, really full throttle from the Titans from start to end. Actually, the past 4 times that these teams have played, the Titans have won. And most of the times it's been very, very one-sided. Like earlier this year, they had 173 rushing yards, the Titans did, and they just completely carved up the Ravens. Last year, Derrick Henry ran wild, like we said, and he just completely led that team to the next round. Then the Ravens won 21-0 in 2018. Big day for Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco's no longer on the team. And then in 2017, the Titans won again. Huge day from Kevin Byard. So these two teams, there's a growing rivalry between the two of them. They seem to play each other a fair amount, as the Titans and the Ravens have been in the playoffs over the past few years. So it's very interesting to see how these two teams will play each other and how the two coaches will react to seeing each other for the 3rd time in the past 2 seasons.
Now, Jimmy, this is clearly a revenge game for the Ravens, as last year they were the clear favorite to make it to the Super Bowl. And as you said, King Henry ran right through them and became overnight a superstar within the NFL. So how do the Ravens try to slow down King Henry and not make him do exactly what he did a year ago?
Yeah, so it's a lot easier said than done to stop Derrick Henry. He's 6'3", 250 pounds. He's built like a refrigerator out there. Imagine trying to tackle a refrigerator. That's how you try to tackle Derrick Henry. You need 2, 3, sometimes 4 guys to take him down. So they're going to need to rotate a lot of their players defensively, because later on in the game is when Derrick Henry comes alive. When everyone is more tired, those 2-3 yard rushes become 4, 5, 6 yard rushes. They extend drives, they extend plays. That's when the Titans get better in the games, is when everyone gets tired. Derrick Henry's not, and everything just works very well for the Titans. So as far as defensively, they're going to need to stack the box, but they're going to need to be very careful, because once you stack the box against this Titans team, that's when they hit you on the play action. Ryan Tannehill is one of the best players with the play action in the NFL. He has the 5th highest passer rating, and he goes to deep threats, Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith. So they're going to need to be careful with that, but their first goal needs to be to stop Derrick Henry. And in order to do that, they need to get penetration from the interior of the defensive line. So Calais Campbell, their other D tackles, they need to get a lot of penetration interior, and then their linebackers and Patrick Queen especially, they need to kind of soak up the pressure on the inside and kind of go a little bit more further to the line of scrimmage in order to stop King Henry.
What's up, Jimmy? I think I have two questions. One is a little bit more serious than the other, but so another matchup that is in this game is the passing defense of the Titans and Baltimore's surging offense in the second half of the season. Tennessee's passing defense was not very great this year, as they allowed the 29th most passing yards per game, and they only collected 19 sacks on the season, which was 30th in the league. So do you think the Ravens could take advantage of that? And my second question, if there was $1 million on the line and you had the opportunity to tackle either Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry, who do you think you would be able to tackle?
Wait, Jimmy, before you say anything, Jory, I love that you asked that question. Jimmy, continue. Sorry.
All right, so I'm going to start with your second question, Jory, and I would 100,000% tackle Lamar Jackson. I don't think that I would be able to tackle Derrick Henry, considering I weigh half of what he weighs. And he's, like I said, he's built like a refrigerator. I'm not trying to tackle a refrigerator tonight. So I'm definitely going to go after Lamar Jackson. As elusive as he is, I would much rather try to tackle him than try to tackle Derrick Henry. As for your first question, I would definitely say that the Ravens do have a chance to take advantage of this Titans passing defense. Like you said, it's one of the worst in the league. They don't get any pass rush. They drafted Harold Landry a few years ago and thought that he was going to be the edge rusher of the future there. Never really panned out that way. So Lamar Jackson's going to have a lot of time to throw the ball. Now, the Ravens don't have the best weapons on the outside. They have Mark Andrews, who's a fantastic tight end, one of the 5 best tight ends in the league. But outside of that, I'm not really scared by anyone. Like, Hollywood Brown is a good receiver, not great. He's probably a number 2 receiver on a good team. Willie Snead, again, probably a number 3, maybe a number 4 on a good team. So they don't really have a lot of weapons on the outside that I would be scared of per se. They need to take advantage of their rushing attack is what I would think. And that's how it's going to get the game won for Baltimore. But as far as the Titans pass defense, it does have their holes, but when they do need to tighten up, like we saw last year in the playoffs, they can definitely tighten up and shut down a Tom Brady like last year. They did it to Patrick Mahomes for the first half of the AFC Championship last year. They did all game against Lamar Jackson last year in the playoffs. So come this time tomorrow, or this time on Sunday, I do think that the Titans pass defense will step up. Again, they're under Mike Vrabel, who's one of the best coaches in the NFL. I think he's a top 10 coach in the NFL. So I think he's going to have his guys ready to defend Lamar Jackson's passing attack. And I don't think that the Ravens are going to have a lot of potential through the air on Sunday.
Let's look at the star quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, who, to me, right now, he's 0-2 in the playoffs in his career, and that is a credible talking point. In terms of pressure, how much pressure is on Lamar Jackson to win this game on Sunday, Jimmy?
There's a huge amount of pressure on Lamar Jackson. This is possibly a make or break game for Lamar Jackson's legacy. As we all know, he's one of the most talented players in the league, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but there's a lot of question marks about him. Just how durable is he? Just how long will he be able to run the ball like he's doing right now? Just how long can he not throw the ball down the field? Because a lot of defenses are figuring out that all they need to do is stack the box against Lamar Jackson, and you have him mostly figured out. He's not the most accurate thrower in the league. No knock against him. That's just not his game. He is just better throwing across the middle to a guy like Mark Andrews than he is throwing on the outside to Hollywood Brown, to Willie Snead, to some of these other guys. So I think it's huge for Lamar Jackson, especially because the Ravens have a much better roster than the Titans do. They're coming into the game as 3-point favorites. So this is a tight game, but the Ravens do have the edge based in Vegas. I do think that top to bottom, their offense is a better offense than the Titans. I don't think it's close with their defense. Their defense is so much better than the Titans' defense. So the game will be won and lost, I believe, with Lamar Jackson and how the Titans' defense kind of tries to contain him as best as they can. If they stack the box against Lamar Jackson, it's going to be a long night for Baltimore fans.
There's been so much pressure on the Ravens as they were on the outside looking in on these playoffs to begin with for so much of the late window of this season and winning those last 5 games, but only one playoff win in those 5 games. So how much stock do you put into that hot streak, Jimmy, And could they turn it into something even more in the playoffs?
I don't put any stock into that. I mean, they beat the Bengals. Good job. You beat the third worst team in the NFL. You beat the Giants. Congratulations. They won 5 games. So I don't really put any stock into this winning streak. They beat the Browns, which is a good win. They're a playoff team. They're a good all-around team. So I do think that's a good win. But aside from that win, none of that really like impresses me. I mean, the Jets had better wins this year than the Ravens did. So, and I'm talking about the Jets. The Jets beat the Rams, and they beat the who else did they beat?
The Browns.
The Browns, yeah. So they both beat the Browns, and then the Ravens. Who's their other big win? They don't have another big win on their schedule. I mean, they lost to the Titans earlier in the year. If they beat the Titans, I would have said that would be another big one they had. So
Well, the Browns was a big win.
the Browns, yeah, that's one big win. But I mean, the Jets beat the Browns. So what does that really say?
Well, to be fair though, the Browns were healthy when they played the Ravens in I think it was December 14th. The Browns weren't so healthy when they played the Jets. I'm just saying.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but it's not like the Browns rely on their passing game that much in games, especially to their receivers. Like most of their passing attack, well, most of their offense goes through their running game with Kareem Hunt and with Nick Chubb. When they pass the ball in the red zone, it's mostly Austin Hooper or whoever other tight ends they have. So I think that the Browns win is a nice win to have, but I don't know if that's really an impressive win.
Joey, I'll let you ask the last question before we wrap things up with Jimmy.
I mean, there's not much else really to say about this matchup other than who do you think is going to win this game?
Yeah, so in this game, if I was a betting man, I would take the Titans to win this game. I think that the Titans have an incredibly difficult formula to beat because they control the time possession. They control the line of scrimmage on usually both sides of the line of scrimmage, both on offense and on defense. They run a 90s and an early 2000s style of offense in the 21st century. You never see anyone do this. You have Derrick Henry running the ball at you 30 times a game. And later on is when he really does the bulk of what his production is. Over the last 4 games, Derrick Henry has 710 rushing yards. So now is when he's hitting his stride. This is exactly what you want from the Titans and exactly what you don't want to see with the Baltimore Ravens defense. He just asked Josh Norman how he feels about tackling Derrick Henry. The man got thrown like 3 yards and he's a grown man. I just think that over time, when Derrick Henry's getting these handoffs and he's going 4, 5, 6 yards, then you get hit by the play action. It's going to be an uppercut to the Ravens secondary and one that they just can't overcome. I think that the Ravens are going to win this game. No, I think the Titans are going to win this game 31-24.
This is one of those games that really could go either way, and I would say this might be the closest game of all of them. But Jimmy Bliss, thank you so much for your time. Your great reporting as always. And thank you for your prediction and also your hot takes as well.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Have a good night, guys.
All right, you got it, Jimmy. Once again, that was Jimmy Bliss, our reporter, breaking down everything you need to know about the Titans and Ravens game that kicks off right around 1 p.m. on Sunday evening. Right now, we're just waiting for our reporter, Dalton Allison, to come in and talk about the Saints and Bears. I don't know if we have him yet. Okay, he is in the waiting room, so we can bring him on whenever it is. But Jimmy said a lot of crazy things, guys. So, but we'll talk about that after we're done breaking down all of the individual games as Dalton Allison joins us now. So we're just going to give him a few seconds to get settled in. And oh, what a great background. Dalton, can you hear us?
Yeah, of course. And, it's not just a background. I'm sitting here enjoying the gumbo and the beignets and everything, man. I'm living my life.
You're tailgating?
Oh, yeah. Socially distant, of course. I'm actually the only one, as you could see, in the parking lot. So I'm having a great time right now.
All right. My question to you, Dalton, is that Drew Brees, there have been reports that this could be his last season and potentially Sunday could be his last game. So how much pressure is on him to not lose to Mitch Trubisky of all quarterbacks and to possibly end his career on a high note with at least just one playoff victory?
Yeah, well, this is the time of the year when the pressure is on everyone. So I know Drew Brees right now is going to be relying a lot on his teammates, and his performance is going to be completely dependent on the health of two of his key offensive players. I mean, we're looking at Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, still question marks heading in to Sunday afternoon's matchup. And Kamara, believe it or not, practiced remotely. He practiced remotely today via TVU networks, according to Adam Schefter. So he had a trans receiver, so a live video decoder was at his house. He was able to view what was happening during practice, and he was able to wear something on his head where he was receiving live calls from Sean Payton, and he was going through the motions like he was going to play on Sunday. So that's going to be huge for them, because I think something that we've noticed, and I think why the rumors have been swirling big time this year about Drew Brees retiring, is that his long ball is just not the same as it used to be, and you can tell it from the eyes, and you can tell it by the amount of times that he's checked down on the throws. And the Saints, lucky for him, have built great offensive pieces around him, and that's why they are where they are right now.
First, Dalton, I'm loving the playoff beard that you got growing right now.
Thanks.
Absolutely fantastic.
You know it was all for nothing too, so we're just gonna hold on to it till hockey season.
I love it. I love it, man. First, this Bears team might be the biggest underdog of the entire weekend. And coming into that, it's head coach Matt Nagy. Do you think he has to win this game to possibly save his job? Because the writing is on the wall. Not the best season for the Bears. When a couple years ago, they were believed to be possibly a Super Bowl candidate.
You know, honestly, I don't think that if Matt Nagy loses this game, it'll be his last season. To be honest, the Bears have never had an elite quarterback ever. And Mitch Trubisky is just another one of those quarterbacks that the Bears are pushing out there and saying, hey, good luck out there, insert quarterback name. Good luck against this elite defense you're going to be facing. So I think with Nagy, he's doing the best that he can with what he has. And I think that they're still going to give him some time just because of his pedigree and the fact, he hasn't been there an extremely long time. I think they've seen some positives from him. I mean, at the end of the day, he did lead this team to the playoffs without really a number one quarterback through the entire season. They couldn't make up their minds whether they wanted Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky, and they settled on Mitch towards the end. And it worked out for them, albeit they played some awful defenses their last 4 games of the season. I actually live with a Bears fan, and he said that it didn't feel right that they were in the playoffs, but nonetheless, they're there, and that's what matters.
Hey, Dalton, this is a question again about the New Orleans Saints, as they've been a team that's somewhat underperformed in the past. Last year they lost in the wild card to the Minnesota Vikings, and then the year before that, losing in the conference championship to the Los Angeles Rams. So again, they're heavy favorites, like Christian mentioned, but do you think there's a lot of pressure on them just to perform that to the ability that they're supposed to?
Yeah, Jory, you know what? There's massive pressure on the Saints. I'm going to read an interesting stat. I'm not going to call anyone a refrigerator like Jimmy Bliss, but the last 4 times a team who is 8-8 or worse made it into the playoffs, they won the wild card round. And that's where the Bears are at right now. So I think that the Bears are the most under-talked about team. The Saints, they have a fantastic defense, as we all know, but they're going to be missing a key part of that defense. Defensive end Trey Hendrickson, he had 13 and a half sacks this season. He's not going to be out there on the field. He has a neck issue for the Saints. So their defense, while it is great, it has struggled in the red zone. They're 29th in red zone defense in the entire NFL, which you wouldn't expect considering they're in the top 5 for overall for passing and rushing defenses. But once they get to the red zone, they're about as porous as a sponge. So it'll be really interesting. I think there's a lot of pressure on the Saints players, and I think that's why Kamara is doing all that practicing at home, because he knows this is an absolutely huge game for the Saints and for Drew Brees' legacy.
Just a few more questions from us, Dalton, before we let you go. My question to you, okay, and I want you to humor me about this, because if there is a scenario where Mitchell Trubisky ends up winning this game, could we see the Chicago Bears holding on to him, although right now he does not have a contract extension from his rookie deal?
I don't know about that. That's a great question because I think even if Mitch Trubisky wins this game, it's not going to be Mitch Trubisky who won this game. I think the Bears have seen a lot of success the past couple of weeks because of David Montgomery. Over the course of the season, Montgomery had over 1,000 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. Most of that came in the last quarter of the season because they were actually, letting an elite running back do his job. So what resulted was the Bears being able to give Mitch Trubisky more cover by running more play option plays because teams were actually afraid that the Bears had a rushing attack. So I think if Trubisky comes out of this game with a victory, everyone's going to know that it wasn't Trubisky unless he proves everyone wrong here and completely lights up the world. I just don't see it happening.
Now, Dalton, do you see this any way differently than Vegas does with the Saints coming out with the win, even though the Saints did drop a huge game against the Eagles not too long ago?
Listen, behind me, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, right? It's hosted the Super Bowl 7 times, BCS National Championship 4 times. I'm coming up with a special title for this game because of the special coverage it's receiving. I'm sure you guys know this game is not only being broadcast on CBS, but also Nickelodeon. So it's going to be the Slime Bowl this week. And the first ever time an NFL game is going to be broadcast on Nickelodeon. And you know what? I think that it is possible for the Bears to come out of this. They got to stop Kamara, which is possible, and they have to force Drew Brees to throw down the field. And then if they can get Montgomery going early in this game and they hold Kamara down early in the game, they have a shot at winning this game. And I think what's really going to be the make or break for this Bears team is the health of Roquan Smith. He went out injured against the Packers last game. That was the tale of 2 different games once he left because the AP All-Pro second teamer, 139 tackles, 4 picks, 18 tackles for a loss. Once he was out of the game, Aaron Rodgers, because he's an elite quarterback, noticed that, and they just picked and picked and picked on the Bears linebackers until, there was nothing, and the Packers came out with that win.
Well, Dalton, that's all the time we have for you. Thank you so much for your excellent reporting, and love the background, love your energy as always, buddy.
Thanks. It was so much fun being on with you guys and following so many great reporters tonight. All the guys are doing such a great job pulling this coverage together, and I couldn't be more proud to be on WSU sports staff.
The only one that I think ruffled some feathers was Jimmy Bliss. So luckily you're not Jimmy.
Yeah, that's funny because Jimmy's pulling in from Sparta, which is only a town over. So if Wilner needs me to, I can go knock on his door. I'll see you guys
Dalton.
later.
All right, take care, Dalton. Once again, that was Dalton Allison, our reporter, breaking everything down for the Saints and the Bears game. But now we can talk about the final game of the Super Wild Card Weekend, which will take place 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time between the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now we have our reporter, Ryan Henry, who's just set to come on with us right now as he's joining us now. So we're just waiting for Ryan.
I'm here.
Ryan, you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you. You guys hear me?
All right. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing all right. How you guys doing?
We are doing quite well. So obviously, let's address the elephant in the room with the Cleveland Browns. And first and foremost, how can you not feel bad for the Cleveland Browns? It's been pretty much 18 years since the last time they made the playoffs, and they're going to do it without their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, as he's sidelined with a positive COVID-19 test. What impact and what difference will that make with the Browns not having their leader, Kevin Stefanski, on the sideline calling plays?
I mean, so you look at their head coach, and I think Kevin Stefanski is really the one guy that you want to point to this turnaround from the 2020 Browns this year and the 2019 Browns last year was him replacing Freddie Kitchens. I mean, the play calling has changed completely. Baker Mayfield has started to become more of like that quarterback, the Browns saw with when they took him number 1 overall. They obviously incorporated the 2 running back system. So, I mean, losing him, it's going to be losing a vital part of what made the 2020 Browns such a dominant team, especially offensively. I mean, so offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, I believe, will be the one calling the plays today. He had some play calling experience like 10 years ago. But he hasn't really called plays at the NFL level in a while. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. And I think, and I'll mention it when I talk about what I think will actually happen as a result. I think Stefanski not being there might make the Browns lose this game, because you look at how well they've played with him coaching, and it's a whole identity shift might just be the difference between a win and a loss.
Ryan, I think that's a great point. Losing your head coach, that's something you don't fathom, and that's just the world that we are now here in 2021. But my question is, there's so much talk about maybe even a postponement that the Cleveland Browns are asking for. How do you feel about the competitive integrity that this game is, that the Browns have to play this game without their coach? Would you want to postpone this game if you had the choice?
I would only push it back to a Monday at latest Tuesday, because I think we are obviously talking about, as the NFL is going along, oh, what happened if a key player missed a game, or a coach, obviously a coach in this instance. And I mean, the NFL never addressed it with a bubble. So it's kind of unfortunately, that's going to be the reality of the situation. I think there's going to be an instance where players and coaches are not going to be there for key games. It's obviously going to ruin some sort of competitive aspect. I mean, I don't think the game will get pushed back, but if they would, I would only push it back a day or two, because then, especially whoever wins that game, the amount of rest is going to be so much. It's going to be a huge difference compared to whoever they face in the second round.
Yeah, and transitioning a little bit to the game, if it doesn't get postponed, there's obviously a potential there. But Pittsburgh, they've had arguably the best defense in the league. Their pass rush was second to none, as they ranked first in both sacks and QB hits this season. And, just looking at any kind of metric, you'll see the Steelers at the top of the list. But you can't really say the same about their offense, as down the stretch of the season, they've dealt with somewhat of a stalling of their offense. So you saw a lot of drops from their receivers, and their running game was almost the worst in the NFL. So how do you think how do you think the Steelers offense can somewhat bounce back in the playoffs? And do you think it'll be enough for them to win this game against the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, going to your first point about it being bounced back, I think they just have to give the ball more to James Conner. I mean, I know he's not the greatest running back, but I mean, he has shown 2 years ago that he has the ability to be a legitimate ball carrier. He was a Pro Bowl nomination. I think he almost had 1,000 rushing yards. So he obviously has that potential. Ben Roethlisberger throwing the ball 50 times a game obviously isn't going to work anymore. I mean, we've seen in the last 4 or 5 weeks, the whole team's been ice cold. Ben Roethlisberger's turning the ball over. You said receivers are dropping the ball. So I think they just need to get James Conner involved more with running ball and even passing the ball, because he really hasn't been a threat that much this season.
Now, Ryan, one storyline that unfortunately has some sort of a role in the entire lead up is some words from Juju Smith-Schuster, which were actually taken out of context. And for me, it's just very unfortunate, because I don't think he intended to offend the Browns by saying that they're the same old Browns, gray faces. But from your perspective, and if you're especially a member of the Cleveland Browns, going through everything you've gone through, today at 4:30 was the first time you were able to even come together as a team to practice for a playoff game. What are your emotions when hearing something like that?
I just think that it just appears that Juju, even if it was taken out of context, kind of didn't learn his lesson from the whole Bengals situation. When he was dancing on the logos, it's even if it was taken out of context, saying that the Browns are the same Browns when this team is different from the 2019 team, which was different, obviously, than the years they were 1-15 and 0-16. So just to say, oh, it's just the same old Browns, all of us have known our entire lives as being the worst NFL franchise, period. So, I mean, I think it's just disrespectful. I think that gives the Browns a chip on their shoulder, especially Browns defenders. And obviously we saw that in that Bengals game when Juju was dancing, being disrespectful to the Bengals, and they took it personally. So, I mean, it's just a sign of him needing to mature more. And I mean, he has to, even if he didn't intend to be disrespectful, he's just got to pick his words better. And I think the Browns are going to take that personally, even if it wasn't the original intention.
Now, going more into depth in this matchup, for quite some time as Baker Mayfield has become more of a star within the NFL, what do you think you will see from him on Sunday, as he's taken on such a stout defense in Pittsburgh? But we've seen Baker Mayfield have some great games so far this season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Baker's play was the lead contributor to them, kind of, I wouldn't say turn around, but they got really hot, especially at the end of the year. They were 7-3 once OBJ went down. So, I mean, I think he'll act as a game manager. I think their game plan should be just to get the running backs involved because, I mean, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt individually might be top 10, Nick Chubb's definitely top 10, but Kareem Hunt individually is even a top 15 running back. Just getting them involved in the running game and passing game. So Baker Mayfield should serve more as a game manager role, limit his turnovers because, like you said, this Steelers defense is probably the best unit in the league, from the front seven to their secondary. So, I mean, he has shown ability to step up, but I don't think they don't need him, especially against the Steelers offense, who isn't as good offense, who isn't a great offense. They just need to limit his turnovers and kind of just serve as a game manager in this week.
Yeah, and we were talking about Baker Mayfield and some of his former draftee, other players who also drafted in the 2018 NFL draft, that being Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, are also in this playoffs, have also made playoff appearances in the past, but this will be the first playoff appearance for Baker Mayfield. So how much pressure is on him given that he was the first quarterback and the first player selected in that draft, opposed to the other two quarterbacks?
I mean, I think there's been pressure on Baker Mayfield really this entire season. Obviously we saw last year what happened with the Browns. They were touted as like the new king of the AFC North. That obviously didn't happen. And I think he had a chip on his shoulder the whole year because people are saying, the Browns really messed up taking him. Josh Allen, especially now, has turned into an MVP candidate. Lamar won MVP last year. So I think it's just going to be the same mentality he's had for this entire season, just proving the doubters wrong and going out and winning games.
Ryan, I'll have you answer this quickly. Who wins and why?
The Steelers win, and I think it comes down to Kevin Stefanski not being the head coach, and also I didn't get to mention this. The Browns don't have their offensive line's a bit banged up. Their left guard Joel Bitonio is out, and also their all-pro tackle Jack Conklin might miss the game. So I think it comes down to just Kevin Stefanski obviously not being able to call plays, and injuries/illnesses to the offensive line.
Ryan Henry, thank you so much for your excellent coverage of the game, which is set to happen in just under 48 hours from now. But thank you once again, my friend. Hope all is well.
Thank you for having me on.
You got it. That was Ryan Henry, ladies and gentlemen, breaking down the coverage for the Steelers playoff game against the Cleveland Browns. And guys, what we're going to do now, we're going to talk about all of the wild card matchups individually. We're going to go through them, predict who we think will win, and then ultimately we'll fast forward once we get past the wild card round to who we predict to be in the Super Bowl and ultimately win the Super Bowl. But before we do that, though, I want to touch on something we talked about before the show even started. It was the $1 million challenge. Who would you rather tackle, Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson? Guys, look, okay, there is no chance that I would be even able to catch Lamar Jackson. But if I'm able to, right, if we're close to close and that's it, I would much rather prefer to tackle him than the stiff arm king himself, Derrick Henry, because I would rather get juked out and embarrassed that way than just absolutely annihilated by an arm.
I think for myself of who I could bring down, first of all, probably none, but $1 million on the line. Okay. Lamar Jackson, he's too shifty, and I don't have the good foot speed, the good ankles anymore. I don't got it. But if I'm going against Derrick Henry, I'm gonna break something anyways. But I think my best shot is try to go low, and so I'm gonna take Derrick Henry and break my collarbone, and hopefully have $1 million afterwards.
You're a brave man.
Yeah, it's a refrigerator.
I think I have to agree with Christian. Just because Lamar Jackson, his elusiveness it's just absolutely absurd. He's a player that you think you have him in your wraps, and then he'll spin out and run for a 50-yard touchdown or something like that. So I think I would have to go with Derrick Henry as much pain as I would endure in trying to tackle that man. I think I might actually have a better shot at bringing him down than Lamar.
It's straight line versus the shiftiness, and it's just like a killer crossover by Lamar Jackson. And I don't feel like falling on the ground and looking stupid like that. I'd rather just go for the legs, get something broken, and have $1 million afterwards.
But you know what? If Lamar Jackson wanted to run through me, he probably could. So I wouldn't really want to tackle him either. But now I think we can get back to the playoff talk, which I think is great. And we'll start off with Colts versus Bills. And you know what, guys? Preparing for this show, I was thinking to myself, okay, the last time the Colts played in Orchard Park was December 10th, 2017. And I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a blizzard that day. And it was a low-scoring game. In overtime, Buffalo won 13-7. When I looked at the weather report, I shed a tear because I was so disappointed that there will not be any snow tomorrow. Because how fitting would it be for Buffalo to finally be able to host a playoff game and there be absolutely no snow? But nonetheless, I do think Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and even the defense has played well as of late, especially with Micah Hyde in the secondary. I do predict that the Bills will get it done tomorrow. And unfortunately, this may be the last time Phillip Rivers ever suits up in an NFL game.
Michael, I think I'm with you on that one. I think the Colts coming into this, they are a very, very good team. It's just a poor matchup because the Bills are just too strong on offense. And Josh Allen having an MVP caliber season, even though Aaron Rodgers will probably take that one home. And Stephon Diggs has just been so phenomenal. And it's just way overdue for this Bills team. Like they said earlier, I mean, Jonathan Heide talked about it, that 1995. They've been waiting for this chance to get back to the Super Bowl. And I think for the Bills, it starts on Saturday beating the Colts.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to take Buffalo in this matchup again. I just think that their offense is way too potent with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And really, I think the only hope the Colts have is with their running game. But if they get down pretty early because of how potent Buffalo's offense is, I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball so much. So I do think Buffalo will win this matchup.
See, here's the thing. This is the type of game, and we'll keep talking about the other games, and we'll move on to Rams Seahawks. But before we go, though, when talking about the Colts Bills, I don't necessarily want to sleep on the Colts because they have all the makings to make this an interesting game. I mean, even look at last year's game between the Bills and the Texans. The Bills had that game secured, and then they let it go. Granted, it was on the road. It was against Deshaun Watson, a different team at that point because they had DeAndre Hopkins. But still, I do not want to count out the Colts, but I do think the Bills will get it done. So if that's all we got on the Colts and the Bills, I think now we can move on to the Rams and the Seahawks. And you know what, guys? This is a game that I think it's honestly going to be a very low scoring game. And you guys might disagree with me, but it's in Seattle. The weather's always funky in Seattle, especially it always seems like whenever Seattle's in the playoffs, they always play these Saturday games and the weather's just always tricky for whatever reason. And I do want to note this though. Today, January 8th, is actually the 10th anniversary since the Marshawn Lynch beast mode earthquake that ensued in Seattle on that day in 2011. So I just think that it's very fitting now that potentially Seattle has a chance to get things done against their divisional rival. But before I go to you guys, I'll just say that I do think Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks will be able to get things done because for me, I don't know what type of quarterback Jared Goff will be tomorrow because when you're coming off of a thumb injury, you have to grip the ball. That could impact his throwing. And if the Rams do try to play John Wolford at all, I personally think with Jamal Adams' blitzing ability, that will cause a lot of problems, not only for Jared Goff, but if they do try to insert John Wolford and really stretch out the offense and try to do similar to what the Saints do by adding in a running threat, I think it won't help them. So ultimately, I think Seattle gets it done tomorrow.
Yeah, Michael, I think unfortunately we won't see another earthquake with not many fans in the stands tomorrow. But I think you're right on the Seahawks. I believed in the Rams earlier on in this season, and I felt that they were building something, and they had the huge win against the Buccaneers, and yet they dropped the game against the Jets and have kind of been fumbling their way into the playoffs. They could have easily been the third seed in this matchup, yet they're going to be the one on the road here. So I think for the Seahawks, it comes down to if DK Metcalf can win against Jalen Ramsey and see what Russ can do and let Russ cook. And I think for them being at home, I think it's time for the Seahawks to put it all together and put on possibly a show on Saturday, but I think another low-scoring matchup in the NFC West.
I honestly, this entire time, I'm thinking I got to pick the Seahawks. But the more I think about it, I think I'm going to pick the Rams. I think that the Seahawks, this was literally, of every team in this year's playoffs, the worst matchup that the Seahawks could have gotten against Los Angeles. They have, again, I mentioned when we had our reporter on earlier that Russell Wilson had arguably his worst game of the regular season against the Rams in Week 10, and DK Metcalf has been essentially a non-factor in the 2 games against Los Angeles. So I know that there's obviously a lot of questions with Jared Goff and his thumb, but I still believe that, as I think Sean McVay is one of the most dynamic young coaches in the NFL. He's always gonna, even in the game against the Patriots recently for the Rams, he essentially got the best of Bill Belichick in that one. That was the game when Cam Akers had a phenomenal game, the rookie running back for the Rams. I think the Rams can win this game, and I think they're going to do it with defense. I know it's probably foolish of me to bet against Russell Wilson, but I mean he's cooled off a little bit during the second half of the year, and I think the Rams are going to just be hungry to win this game. And their defense, I don't want to bet against that defense. It's so potent. It's incredible, really, that they have Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, arguably the 2 best defensive players in the NFL. So I think I'm going to pick the Rams.
I said back in November, if the Rams could get hot, they could be very dangerous in these playoffs. But hey, I don't know. The thumb kind of scares me about Jared Goff, and we never know what kind of Jared Goff we can get. But when Jared Goff is on, he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the league with throws that so accurate and dropping dimes left and right. But I don't know what we'll see on Saturday.
The only way the Rams can win, guys, is if Jared Goff and that entire offense, they are in sync and they are consistent. But they have to score points. They cannot rely on field goal kicking. And that was a problem for them in that Week 16 matchup. If they can find a way to get into the end zone and really challenge Seattle's defense, which has struggled mightily, especially for a majority of the season, but towards the end they started to get it together, then there could be a different outcome. But I think now we can kind of shift gears and look at the nightcap for tomorrow night's final playoff game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington football team. And you know what, guys? I personally think this matchup bodes better for Tampa, because I think if the Giants were in this as opposed to WFT, I think the Giants would have a much better chance at winning that game, because we've already seen that matchup this season between Tampa and New York. And let me remind you, New York would have hosted the same way at FedEx Field Washington football team is hosting. So personally, I think that Tampa will have an easier time with Washington, especially with Alex Smith still being injured. And if you're Todd Bowles and that defense, there's only one thing you can do: blitz, blitz, blitz. That's what you have to do. Force Alex Smith to drop back, because unfortunately he has a bad leg. And for Washington, it's been shown that his timing has struggled. And when you pressure him, he's not the most accurate quarterback in the world. So if you're Todd Bowles, if you're Bruce Arians, you want to make sure that your defensive scheme and your defensive game plan is as best as it can be, and that you are pressuring the quarterback. Even if it's not Alex Smith, even if it's Taylor Heineke, an inexperienced playoff quarterback, you want to let him know that you cannot stand in this pocket without getting hit. So I think Tampa will do that, and I think Tom Brady and the Buccaneers get it done tomorrow night.
You know, Michael, I believe more in the Joe Matthews white uniforms than you do. And I think that defensive line is so strong for the Washington football team that it can wreak havoc against this Tampa Bay line. And Bruce Arians has even talked about it, how he's a little bit nervous about that defensive line out coming into this game with Alex Smith. They're a 4-1 team. So it's a different Washington football team than we've seen throughout the season. But I think with how everything else goes in the NFC East, it's not going to look too pretty when it comes Saturday night. And I'm going to roll with the Buccaneers because that offense is so stout. Chris Godwin's cooking, and hopefully we see a lot from Mike Evans as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Buccaneers as well. But again, I do think that there is a universe in which Washington can win this game because we saw that against the Steelers earlier in the season. Again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that Washington was the first team to beat the Steelers, and we know how incredible their defense was. And Michael, you talked about you just have to get to the quarterback. Well, a team that does that better than anyone in the league couldn't necessarily do that against Washington. So I think there is a universe in where Washington can win this game, and that's going to be with their defense, obviously. But again, it's so hard to bet against Tom Brady, especially when he has arguably the best receiving core in the league with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, not to mention Gronk and their running game with Ronald Jones. I mean, that offense is just absolutely incredible. So it's really hard to pick against the Buccaneers. So I think I'm going to have to choose Tampa Bay in this matchup.
I am certainly not picking against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because he is legit, and even at 40+ years old, he's still performing at a high level. But now looking at the Ravens-Titans game, that's a game that I predict is going to go down to the wire. And you know what? I think I'm going to please Wilner Lewis here, and I'm not just saying this just to say it because he's in the room with us. I think Lamar Jackson's going to get it done. I do not think he gets enough credit and enough respect for the type of quarterback that he is. And I think he gets too much flack for the Ravens' struggles in those previous two playoff games against the Chargers in 2018 and the Titans last season. I think the Ravens will be victorious on Sunday.
Michael, we have to stop agreeing because it's kind of crazy right now. For me, I think the Ravens is one of those teams that could make a deep run. I think there is some stock in those wins that they had. Yes, they're not that great of wins when you're playing the NFC East and you play the Giants and the Cowboys and the Bengals. Yes, I completely understand. But the thing that people say about the Ravens is, oh, they're just a running team. They can't put up points like that. That's not true. They're a top 10 scoring offense, number 7 in the league, 29.3 points per game. And on that run that they had in those last 5 games, they're only allowing 17.8 points per game. And that's because their defense is so stout, number 2 in the league in giving up points. And I think for the Ravens, it starts on Saturday. They need this revenge game against Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans. And I think their offense can do enough to run the clock and put up points, especially against that weak Titans defense. And that defense of the Ravens can hold Tannehill and Derrick Henry enough to get a win.
Yeah, and another, I guess, misconception almost around Baltimore is that, or at least around Lamar Jackson, is that he's not a quarterback that can bring you back into games when he's trailing. And I feel like that's unfair of him to get that flack because they're a team that just doesn't trail very often. They're a team that wins a lot of games by a lot of points. And he's shown in the past that he can have game-winning drives. He did it against the Browns earlier this season with that phenomenal comeback where he left the game, went to the locker room with reportedly cramps, but whatever it is you think he was doing back there in the locker room. But hey, we saw that he could do it. We saw that he could do it, and I think just in this matchup, I think that the Ravens are going to have a vengeance, and I would imagine that they're going to come out hungry to beat this team. It feels like it's a divisional matchup almost between these two teams because of the history, but I think the Ravens can do it. I think the Ravens can win this game. I do think it's going to be a very high-scoring affair as well. I think a lot of points are going to be put up on the board because of how good both of these offenses are. But I think in the end, I think Lamar is finally going to get his playoff win.
A lot of people feel that the winner of this game could potentially win it all. Now, personally, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but we shall see. Now, looking at the Bears versus Saints game, I have something that you guys will probably disagree with, but I think the Chicago Bears are going to get it done on Sunday. And you know what? Father Time has never lost, and he will never lose. I think Drew Brees' old age, especially with his broken ribs and his inability to really throw the ball down the field, I think it is going to really hinder the New Orleans Saints on their offense. And who knows what type of offense they're going to have, especially with the bevy of players that were out due to COVID-19. Who knows what impact that will have. So I do think the Chicago Bears will pull off one of the biggest upsets the NFL has seen in recent history, and they will get it done on Sunday.
Michael, and here I thought we were long lost twins. We finally disagree on this one. For me, the New Orleans Saints are just too strong right now. I think on offense, yes, we don't know what Father Time will do for Drew Brees, but we've seen for decades how much he can do for this Saints offense, the number 5 scoring offense in the league, and also number 5 scoring defense on the other side. And I don't think Mitchell Trubisky can do enough against that defense going down to the Bayou. But I also want to point out what Dalton Allison brought up. I'm excited to watch that Nickelodeon broadcast, see if we see any slime in this game. But I think the only person that's coming out with slime is going to be the Bears, and I think the Saints pull off this one.
Yeah, I mentioned or a little bit earlier that the Saints have vastly underperformed in previous playoffs. Again, they lost to the Vikings in the wild card last year, and then in a conference championship the year before that. So this is a team that, again, has struggled to meet expectations. But I do think that they should win this game against Chicago. And I honestly think that this could be like a legacy game for Drew Brees. Even though he did deliver the Saints their first championship back in 2010, I still think that this is a very important one for him because, again, they have failed to meet their expectations in the past. And when you have a team that's this good, their offense with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, and then their defense, which was incredible this year. They ranked 8th in sacks, 5th in QB hits, allowed the 4th lowest passer rating. Their defense has been absolutely phenomenal. I think this all hinders on the shoulders of Drew Brees, and it's going to be very important for him to take down the Bears, especially at home.
I just personally think the pressure that Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack will bring to Drew Brees, I just think it'll be too much to handle. And you know what? I think there's a chance, especially with my prediction, this is the last time that Drew Brees ever plays an NFL game. But kind of putting a nice bow on the Super Wild Card weekend games before then we jump ahead to our Super Bowl predictions. The Browns versus the Steelers. And you know what? I'm pretty sure I'm going to agree with both of you guys. I see the Steelers getting it done in this game because when you don't have your head coach, that's a big loss, especially when he's the one who was credited with the majority of your team's success. Because let's be honest, guys, when Hugh Jackson was there, and even last year when Freddie Kitchens was there, Cleveland was an absolute dumpster fire. But the fact that Kevin Stefanski was able to extinguish that fire and turn this team into a legitimate playoff contender and ultimately a playoff team, I think is great. But it just goes to show how impactful he was. Removing him and taking him out, I think to me that is too big of an X factor to lose. And I think with Big Ben's experience and the way the Steelers have been able to play down the stretch, granted they lost to Cleveland last week, but Big Ben didn't play, I do think the Steelers will win.
Yeah, the pandemic rearing its head again in this one. It's just too much for Cleveland to overcome. And if it was Cleveland at full strength, I would have wholeheartedly gone with the Browns in this matchup because I don't know if the Steelers can keep up with that same offense that Stefanski has drawn up and the points that the Browns can put up. But now without Stefanski on the sidelines, all eyes are on Baker Mayfield, see what he can pull out of there. And I think it's going to be too much. I think in week 17 against the Steelers backups still was a struggle in that game when they needed to win that game as well. So you have to roll with the Steelers because so much of this season, they were dominant. And even though you may not believe in some of their wins and might feel that as if they are frauds within this league, it's too much. That defense is too strong. But if in another world, in another realm, I'm going with the Browns on this one.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are going to get the job done. But I don't want to, I shouldn't take away from Cleveland. They've had a phenomenal season. And I think it's just not their year. It's tough, 3 teams from that division got into the playoffs this year. So it just shows how great they had to be just to get here. And it is really a shame that their head coach is not going to be able to be at the game for them. So, but I think it's going to be Pittsburgh that wins this one. But again, if you're a Cleveland Browns fans, I would keep your head up because they got a great young team that they're building out there in Ohio.
In the 2002 playoffs, the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers went up against one another. And unfortunately for all you Browns fans out there that may be watching and listening, you did not win that one. But personally for me, I do see a very similar outcome with the Steelers. Just they're healthy, and that's important. But now we can get to, I would say, the part of the show that I think all three of us have been looking forward to the most, and that is our Super Bowl predictions. So I'm going to go to you guys first. Who are your picks to get out of the AFC, the NFC, and ultimately win it all? Christian, we'll start with you.
For me, it's hard to bet against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, but the thing is, every single Super Bowl, there's never been the ultimate home field advantage. So I'm going to go with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers because he's been putting on a phenomenal season up there in Green Bay, and it rolls through Lambeau. And Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau is phenomenal. When he's leading at halftime, he is 69-1-1. So I'm betting on Aaron Rodgers to get back to the Super Bowl. And who he's facing, I don't see it that it's going to be 1 versus 1 with the Chiefs and the Packers. For myself, I am believing in Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens to give back to the Super Bowl. I think that offense is going to get red hot, and the variations that Greg Roman can bring in all those different running looks, it's so phenomenal that you don't even know which way the ball is going, even though it might look exactly the same play each down and each run. It's phenomenal. And I think Lamar Jackson can cook things up to get the Ravens all the way from a wild card round to the Super Bowl. And who's holding the Lombardi trophy? It's a toss-up. Aaron Rodgers, phenomenal. Lamar Jackson, MVP of last year. But you know what? I'm going to roll. I'm from the DMV. I love the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to go with the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson with the Super Bowl MVP.
Wow. So you say, Christian, Ravens win it all, and they will do so against the Green Bay Packers.
Yes, sir.
All right, Jory, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a tough prediction, and, I could look so foolish at the end. But I think in the NFC, it's really hard to bet against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. I feel like just the fact that they have the home field advantage throughout the playoffs, it's going to be so key for them. And just the fact that they've been so special all season long, I feel like Aaron Rodgers, he's just going to deliver or at least deliver a Super Bowl appearance to Green Bay in this season after drafting his successor potentially in Jordan Love in this year's draft. He goes out and gets them back to the Super Bowl. So I think the Packers are going to come out of the NFC, and in the AFC, I feel like it's going to be the team that can take down the Chiefs. And I feel like the team that has the best chance of doing that is the Buffalo Bills, because I think they have the best, in terms of all the teams in the AFC, I think their offense is the one that can really hang with the Chiefs offense. We all know that the Chiefs offense is so special with Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, all the weapons that they have. So I think Josh Allen and that team can hang with the Chiefs, at least on the offensive side, and they can do a good job defensively as well, slowing down Patrick Mahomes when they need to. I know that's obviously an extremely tall task, but I think Buffalo has all the pieces really to match up with a team like the Chiefs. And I just expect that Buffalo is going to come out of the AFC.
All right, so what's your Super Bowl? So you say Green Bay, Buffalo.
Yeah, and, in this matchup, I think you got to go with seniority. So I would imagine that Aaron Rodgers is going to take down Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl, and I think he's going to deliver Green Bay another championship.
All right, so Christian, you have the Ravens winning it all. Jory, you said Green Bay? You said Green Bay. Yes. For my prediction, the closest the NFL has ever come to a team hosting the Super Bowl, at least in recent memory, were the Minnesota Vikings in 2017, 2018. I'm here to tell you this will happen this year. Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are coming out of the NFC. They will get the job done, and they will host Super Bowl against, coming out of the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. So, Jory, I do agree with you on that front. But when it comes to who is going to win it all, give me Tom Brady. Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win the Super Bowl this year. And it all comes down to experience. If there's any quarterback you want driving your ship or captaining your ship, it is Tom Brady. And I think especially playing with a team he's very familiar playing against in the Buffalo Bills, I do think Tom Brady will be a champion and he will win his 7th Super Bowl ring.
I think it's so fitting that the one time you could get the ultimate home field advantage, there's limited fans in the stands. But, I mean, both great picks from you guys. I think the Buffalo Bills could make a deep run as well. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs have been cooking so much. But I don't know. I feel good about the Ravens.
I'm surprised sorry, Joe, you go.
Oh yeah, just as you know, on your Tampa Bay Tom Brady pick, if Tom Brady wins another championship, I don't think anyone in the history of the NFL will ever surpass him as being the best player of all time. I mean, he basically already has that title, but if he gets another ring, especially with a team other than the Patriots, he's got the best legacy of all time, easily.
I want to see Tom Brady win it just to see how angry and how jealous Bill Belichick will be. And honestly, Brady will be able to mark his own writing. He'll be able to kind of etch out his own historic season. So for me, that's why I think. But that's going to end the show. It was a fantastic 2 hours. A big time thank you to everyone out there viewing. A big time thank you to all of our reporters who contributed with excellent coverage. And obviously, my two amazing co-hosts, Jory Mickens and Christian Gardner. And last but certainly not least, we could not have done this tonight without the great work from our producer and sports director, Wilner Lewis. But that will do it. I am Michael Daly for my co-host, Jory Mickens and Christian Gardner, saying good night. And we hope you enjoy Super Wildcard Weekend beginning tomorrow at 1